Let me tell you something kinda surprising that's been on my mind lately. You ever notice how sometimes the world just flips the script on what you expect? Like, you think you know how things work, big countries trading with each other, cars coming from one place, ending up in another, and then, out of nowhere, the whole game changes. Well, that's exactly what's happening right now with cars, tariffs, and a few countries you wouldn't expect to see teaming up. So picture this. For decades, if you bought a German car in the US, maybe a slick BMW, a sturdy Volkswagen, something that makes you feel like you're cruising the Autobahn, even if you're just stuck in LA traffic, chances are it either came straight from Europe or, at the very least, had parts that did. Same goes for French cars, though those are a little rarer here, and definitely for Korean brands like Hyundai and Kia. The US has always been a huge magnet for these cars and the parts that make them tick. But then, boom, here comes a curveball. The Trump administration, in a move that's got everyone in the auto world talking, slaps a whopping 25% tariff on imported cars and auto parts. Not just a little fee, not a minor bump, 25%. That's the kind of number that makes CEOs spit out their coffee and accountants start sweating through their suits. And this isn't just a little trade spat. This is the kind of thing that shakes up entire supply chains, the invisible highways that connect factories in Germany, design studios in France, battery plants in Korea, and, of course, the dealerships and showrooms all across America. Suddenly, all those cars and parts are a lot more expensive to bring into the US. And if you're a car company, you've got a choice. Eat the cost, which, let's be honest, nobody wants to do, or pass it on to the customer and hope they'll still buy your car even though it's thousands of dollars more expensive. Now, before I go any further, let me just say, if you're into this kind of behind-the-scenes look at how the world really works, you might want to hit that subscribe button. I dig into these kinds of stories all the time, and trust me, things are only going to get weirder from here. Anyway, back to the story. So what do France, Germany, and Korea do? Do they just throw up their hands and say, well, I guess we're out of the American market? Not a chance. These countries are way too invested, and the stakes are way too high. Instead, they do something clever. They start looking north. Yup, to Canada. Now, Canada's always been there, quietly doing its thing, making cars, trading with both the US and the rest of the world. But suddenly, with these new tariffs, Canada goes from being the friendly neighbor to being the hottest club in town. Everyone wants in. And it's not just because of maple syrup and hockey either. Canada has trade deals, infrastructure, and most importantly, it's not slapping a 25% tariff on everything with four wheels. Germany, for example, moves fast. They sign a massive $10 billion deal with Canada, duty-free auto parts, hydrogen supplies, the works. Imagine the logistics. German parts flowing into Canadian factories, assembled into cars that can be sold across North America without getting hammered by tariffs. It's like rerouting the river when you hit a dam. The water still flows, just in a different direction. And it's not just the Germans. South Korea, which has become a powerhouse in electric vehicle batteries, think LG, Samsung, all those brands that are quietly powering the next generation of cars, starts shifting billions in investments to Canada. They're building battery plants, setting up shop, making sure that even if the US market is a little tougher to crack, they can still sell to Canadians and maybe even find clever ways to get their products into the US through back channels or future trade deals. France, too, is getting in on the action. They see Canada as a new gateway for their hydrogen exports, a clean energy dream that was supposed to flow straight into the US, but now finds a new home up north. It's like everyone's at a party, and when the host gets grumpy and starts charging a cover at the door, the cool kids just move the party next door. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about cars. The ripple effects are huge. Denmark, for example, was all set to send a ton of wind turbine components to the US. Big, green energy investments, the kind of stuff that powers the future. But with new taxes on wind turbines, Denmark says, you know what? Let's take our $1.5 billion and invest it in Canada instead. Suddenly, Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan are getting new wind farms, and Denmark's still selling its tech, just not to the US.
Brazil, Australia, Mexico, they're all looking at Canada now, shifting exports, investing in new projects, finding ways to keep their economies humming even as the US throws up roadblocks. It's like watching a game of musical chairs, only the music is international trade policy and the chairs are billion-dollar deals.
Now, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, but what does this mean for me? Well, let's break it down. If you're in the market for a new car, you might notice that prices are creeping up, especially for anything that used to come from overseas. That's the tariff at work. But you might also start seeing more cars that were assembled in Canada or that have Canadian parts. The labels might not change, but the supply chain sure has. And if you work in the auto industry or in any business that depends on international trade, you're probably feeling the stress. Companies are having to rethink where they build things, how they ship them, even what kinds of cars they make. Some might decide it's just not worth it to sell in the US anymore, or they might double down on making things in Canada and shipping them across the border. There's also a political side to all this. European leaders, especially in Germany and France, are not happy. They're talking about hitting back, maybe slapping their own tariffs on American goods. It's like a trade war, and nobody really wins those. Canadian officials, meanwhile, are playing it cool. They know they're in a good spot, picking up new business and investments, but they're also aware that things could change fast if the US decides to shift its policy again. But let's zoom out for a second. What we're really seeing here is a shift in the way the world does business. The old model, where the US was the center of the universe and everyone else just orbited around it, is starting to crack. Countries are realizing that they can work with each other, find new partners, build new supply chains that don't depend so much on the American market. It's kind of like if you've always gone to the same grocery store for years, but then one day they jack up the prices on everything you like. At first, you grumble and pay the extra, but eventually you start checking out the new store down the street. Maybe it's a little farther, maybe the parking lot's not as nice, but hey, the prices are better, the people are friendly, and you don't feel like you're getting gouged every time you buy a loaf of bread. That's what Canada is right now, the new grocery store that everyone's discovering. And as more countries make the switch, the old store might start to notice that its aisles are a little emptier, its cash registers a little quieter. Of course, this isn't the first time the world's had to adapt to new trade rules. Every few decades, something comes along that shakes things up. A new technology, a war, a political shift. But what's different now is how fast it's all happening. In the past, it might have taken years for companies to move factories, set up new supply chains, figure out new trade routes. Now, with digital technology, instant communication, and global logistics networks, these shifts can happen almost overnight. And that means the consequences, good and bad, show up a lot faster too. For Canada, this is a golden opportunity. They're getting new investments, new factories, new jobs. For the US, though, there's a risk. If too many companies decide it's just not worth dealing with the tariffs, they might pull out altogether, leaving American workers and consumers with fewer choices and higher prices. It's a delicate balance. On the one hand, you want to protect your own industries, make sure your workers have good jobs, keep your economy strong. But on the other hand, if you make it too hard for companies to do business, they'll just go somewhere else. And in a world as connected as ours, there's always somewhere else to go. Now, I know some people hear tariffs and their eyes glaze over. It sounds boring, technical, like something only economists care about. But the truth is, this stuff affects all of us. It's the reason your next car might cost more, or why your favorite brand suddenly disappears from the showroom. It's why your cousin who works at the parts plant is worried about layoffs, or why your neighbor just got a new job at a Canadian battery factory. And it's not just cars either. These kinds of trade shifts ripple out into everything: electronics, food, energy, even the stuff we don't think about, like the minerals that go into your phone or the software that runs your smart fridge. Every time a country changes its trade policy, it sets off a chain reaction that touches all of us, whether we realize it or not. So, where does it all go from here? That's the big question. Will the US stick to its guns and keep the tariffs in place, hoping to force companies to build more stuff here at home? Or will the pressure from rising prices and shifting investments make them rethink the strategy?
Will Canada keep riding this wave, becoming the new hub for North American trade? Or will the winds shift again and the party move somewhere else? Honestly, nobody knows for sure. But one thing's clear, the world is watching. Companies, countries, even everyday people, they're all paying attention to how this plays out. Because in the end, it's not just about cars or tariffs or trade deals.
It's about how we connect with each other, how we build things, how we shape the future. And maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder that even the biggest, most powerful players can't always call all the shots. Sometimes, the little guy, like Canada, gets a chance to shine. So next time you see a car on the road, or you're shopping for something that comes from halfway around the world, take a second to think about all the hands it passed through, all the deals and decisions that made it possible. Because behind every product, there's a story of people, politics, and sometimes a little bit of drama. And if you want to keep following these stories, you know what to do. Stick around, hit that subscribe, and let's keep exploring the weird, wild world of global trade together. There's always another twist just around the corner. But before I let you go, let's circle back for a minute, because I think this whole situation says something bigger about how we adapt. Think about it. When faced with a wall, do you just stop, or do you find a way around it? That's what these countries are doing. They're not giving up on the American market, but they're not letting one policy change shut them down either. They're getting creative, building new partnerships, finding new routes. It's a little like when you're driving and you hit a traffic jam. You could just sit there fuming, or you could pull up your GPS, find a side street, and keep moving. Sure, it might take a little longer or send you through a neighborhood you've never seen before, but you're still moving forward. That's what Germany, France, Korea, and all these other countries are doing right now. They're not letting one closed door stop them. They're finding another way in. And that's something we can all learn from, whether we're running a business, planning our careers, or just trying to get through the day. The world's always changing, and the people who thrive are the ones who can adapt, who can see the opportunity in the challenge. So yeah, tariffs might sound boring on the surface, but dig a little deeper and you'll find a story about resilience, creativity, and the endless dance of global trade. And who knows, the next time you're behind the wheel, you might just be driving a little piece of that story, crafted in Germany, powered by a Korean battery, assembled in Canada, and driven home right here in the US. Thanks for hanging out with me for this deep dive. If you like this, don't forget to subscribe, because there's always more to uncover. Until next time, keep your eyes open, stay curious, and remember, every story is connected if you just know where to look.